In the scriptures, Matthew and Luke furnish a legal family history of Jesus, tracing ancestry to show that Jesus is the culmination of great promises. Not only is his mother's family neglected, but we also know nothing factual about them except that they existed. Even the names Anne and Joachim come from a legendary source written more than a century after Jesus died. However, the heroism and holiness of these people are inferred from the whole family atmosphere around Mary in the scriptures. Whether we rely on the legends about Mary's childhood or make guesses from the information in the Bible, we see in her fulfillment of many generations of prayerful persons, herself steeped in the religious traditions of her people. According to these traditions, Joachim was a very wealthy and generous man. He and his wife Anne, however, were childless until they were advanced in years. One day, before Anne conceived the Blessed Virgin Mary, Joachim arrived at the temple to make an offering. It was rejected by a man named Reuben, most likely a Levitical priest, because Joachim was childless. "It is not right for you first to bring your offerings because you have not made seed in Israel," he said. Children were exceedingly important at that time. To be childless was understood as disfavor from God. Distressed, Joachim left the temple and studied the scriptures to see if he could find anyone of importance who, like he and Anne, were childless. When he came upon Abraham, he recalled that Abraham was only given a child in his old age. Rather than returning home to Anne, Joachim embarked on 40 days of fasting and prayer in the desert, beseeching God for a child. Anne, for her part, also went to pray, asking God for a child. As she prayed, an angel appeared to her and said, "Anne, the Lord has heard your prayer, and you shall conceive and shall bring forth, and your seed shall be spoken of in all the world." An angel also appeared to Joachim and said, "The Lord God has heard your prayer. Go down hence, for behold, your wife Anne shall conceive." 9 months later, Anne bore a daughter, and the couple named her Mary. Because of a vow they had made when Mary was only 3, Joachim and Anne brought her to the temple, where she took up residence until it was time for her to be married. She was educated by the priests and holy women and spent her days in prayer and union with God. Though the story of the Blessed Virgin Mary's birth and presentation in the temple comes from apocryphal sources, the presentation of Mary in the temple is a liturgical feast first celebrated in the Eastern Church as early as the 6th century and the Western Church in the 11th century, giving credence to a lived faith and liturgical acceptance of her presentation by her parents. Interestingly, in the old city of Jerusalem, there is an ancient church that still stands next to the Temple Mount, in which it is believed that the Blessed Virgin Mary was born and might have lived during her early days after being presented in the temple. Though not much more is known about Saint Joachim and Anne, devotion to them, especially to Saint Anne, grew as early as the 6th century. Churches were built in her honor, prayers were offered for her intercession, devotions were formulated, and patronages were attributed to her. It wasn't until the 6th century that devotion to Saint Joachim began to grow, when his feast day was placed on the general Roman calendar. The strong character of Mary in making decisions, her continuous practice of prayer, her devotion to the laws of her faith, her steadiness at moments of crisis, and her devotion to her relatives all indicate a close-knit, loving family that looked forward to the next generation, even while retaining the best of the past. Regardless of the authenticity of the legends about Saints Joachim and Anne, we know for certain that the Blessed Virgin Mary, the Immaculate Conception, had parents. They loved her, raised her, and offered her to God. Today, they are saints under the names of Joachim and Anne, and the faithful continue to seek their intercession. They are especially called upon for their intercession for grandparents. In fact, on a spiritual level, just as the Blessed Virgin Mary can be seen as our spiritual mother, Saint Joachim and Anne can also be seen as our spiritual grandparents in the order of grace.